What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel once again, and welcome back to episode 2 of TSGG's Indie Adventures. In today's episode, we're going to be focusing on Mutant Year Zero. This is by the Bearded Ladies Consulting developer. It's basically a mixture of the Divinity Original Sin and maybe XCOM a little bit with these stealth elements. I hope you enjoy. If you do, as always, leave a like and subscribe, and have an awesome week. Okay, now that I've introduced the game, let's break it down. Why do I believe Mutant Year Zero is a game that you should play? Number one, it's on Game Pass, so if you are a Game Pass subscriber, you get the game for free with your subscription. That right there makes it very playable and very fun, considering the game is a $39.99 game right now. You can also get it on Steam. I'm not sure about the price there, as it is on PC. It can be a little different. But let's get right into it, break it down. Why do I think you should play the game? What do I think are its strengths, its weaknesses? And yeah, let's see. Starting, as always, with the fun factor and emergence. Now, if you've played the Divinity games, either Original Sin or Divinity 2, you will be very, very familiar with the combat system. XCOM also has a very similar combat, considering it is more stealth based, which this game is. It does tend to have that stealth involved into it, where sometimes there are large packs of enemies, sometimes enemies are higher level than you, and you just want to sneak around them or kind of move on. Much like Divinity, it does have the side dungeons and things that you can explore. It's very open world outside of combat. There is loot to be found and things of that nature, so it's definitely worth it there. As far as fun factor and emergence, it's a very pretty game, which definitely adds to that always. The music, especially when you're trying to sneak around a big baddie or a high-level enemy, is very kind of immersive. It brings you into the game, and it makes you feel like there is actual danger here. So all of this kind of just leads me to say that the game brings you into it. It pulls you in, and it makes it enjoyable. That, coupled with the humor of your characters, Ducks and the Hog. I can never remember the Hog's name, but basically those two things couple together to really create a game that makes me want to play it. Moving on from there, we then have the control and gameplay mechanics. As I mentioned, it's a very much like Divinity, the Original Sin combat. You kind of have the tiles where you can move around and get close enough to actually fire shots. There's a lot of the combat, as I mentioned, was turn-based, so you get close enough, you fire. Hog has a scatter gun, and the Ducks has a crossbow. So this is just to start the game. You'll see a lot of that combat behind me as I'm talking, but that's basically how it is to start. From there, it gets much more advanced. You can find new weapons. You can create new weapons. You can, as you see, when he levels up in the game, it shows you mutation points, so you can create mutations. And it gets very in depth with the combat. And I'm going to be honest, this game does get very, very hard. In the beginning here, this is kind of the tutorial I wanted to run you guys through because I didn't want any spoilers. You're going to see it seems pretty easy. Everything's a 1 or a 2 shot, and it just seems easy. Later on in the game, it gets very, very difficult, and you will have to think about what you're doing before you go into it, or you're going to lose the fight. You'll see how the characters interact in different ways, and they can heal each other and things like that. So it is a very complex game. Even though it is turn-based, it makes you think about what you're going to do next to kind of combat the enemies that you're seeing. If you don't know the story of Mutant Year Zero, basically humanity's wiped out, and the only survivors are scavengers or mutants. They're kind of an animal-person crossbreed, and that's who you play as. So that's basically a quick rundown of the story. There's a lot more to it, obviously. You'll see some of the cutscenes and stuff I'm going to include in the video just to show you guys just how pretty the game is and how well done it was by the Bearded Ladies Consulting. But moving on from there, we're going to get into the graphics, which is actually one of my favorite parts of the game. I mentioned the mutations earlier. These are so cool. Think of what Biomutant showed us in their kind of reveal trailers and stuff, where you dive into a pit of radioactivity and it changes your complete look of your character. Well, this has that, except it comes with mutation points, which are levels. So you'll get mutation points each levels, and you can actually choose how to spend them. Of course, story and replayability is later on, but that adds a lot to the replayability because you can always choose to spend them in different ways throughout the game and to kind of perfect your build or the way that you want to play it, which I do always enjoy in a game like this with the RPG elements, because it really does lend to that kind of future-proofing where you're going to play the game more often because you do want to see those multiple builds. But as far as the actual graphics of the game, the world is very pretty. It's very well done. You always hear me talk about the indie art style. This does not have that. This game has a lot more realism. It kind of leads into that with its kind of top-down view and the turn-based combat. It kind of leans towards that realism, that realistic combat style, and the realistic graphic system. So it's very good. I haven't noticed any kind of issues with it. It is from a smaller developer, of course, as it isn't one of our TSGG indie adventures. So it is from a smaller developer, but I think they did really well graphically with the game. It's very pretty. I constantly keep saying Divinity Original Sin because it is so much alike. Just the kind of graphic style, the actual turn-based combat. They're clones of each other in that manner, I guess. Of course, they're completely different games, completely different stories, but they just constantly remind me of each other, and that's not a negative in any way because I love the Divinity series, and the stories, of course, are quite different, so it's not anything negative. It's just that's what comes to mind when I play this game. As I mentioned, the game came out December 4th of 2018, and it's been something that as I've played all the other games that have come out, all the AAA titles and things, it's something I keep going back to because it is so fun and it does have so much replayability value. But before I get into the replay and story, I'm going to talk about the music and sound, because if you've watched any of our reviews, you've watched some of these, I talk about how I want the music to change with what I'm doing, and because this game has stealth mechanics where you're trying to sneak around in the open world, they have matched the music perfectly to it. You really do feel like if you get caught by this thing that's hunting you, you are dead. And that the music really plays into it. It builds that anxiety for you, and I do love it. The combat music is different. It does change. It does have a lot more brass and kind of just the what you expect in combat, the fighting, the trumpets, things like that. So it is quite enjoyable. It's quite well done. So I have no complaints there with it. But now we're going to get into the story and replayability, which is something I've been kind of hinting at the entire time. Because it's an advanced story, it's difficult, it does get quite hard towards the end, and your choices that you've used throughout with the mutation points and things of that nature, the guns that you've selected, the weapons, they matter. The way you set up before the fight even commences, if you've set up archers or things up top, like you'll see in the combat, we set the duck up top because he's got the crossbow. Things like that are absolutely going to matter as you progress into this game and things become quite difficult. So definitely take a look into that. If you're interested in something that is going to be really thought out combat, you've got to choose your turn very precisely, or even you have to kind of choose the terms that you even want to go into this battle with, or if you want to go into that battle at all. So it's just very thought out and complex combat, and I really do enjoy it. But if you're kind of looking towards for an easier game, this is not going to be the game for you, because one of the biggest complaints online is just how difficult the end game and the mid game fights turn into, especially considering how easy the tutorial was. So people, I think, weren't really expecting it going forward, and it does get very, very difficult, and your choices do matter. And there have been times where I've chosen a mutation and I'm like, oh man, I wish I had gone with this one or that one, because it would have made this fight a lot easier. But that's just the replayability of the game. You're always going to be able to create a new build, choose new mutations, things of that nature, and that really does lend to kind of, as I mentioned before, future-proofing the game. So you can beat it once and put it down, or you can beat it 3 times and choose new builds, new guns, new mutations each time. And that's very, very well done, especially from a smaller indie. And the game being $39.99, being on Game Pass with this is, I can't tell you enough about how much I love Game Pass. If you couldn't tell by my Game Pass Gold series and the games I've chosen so far for the indies are actually both off of Game Pass. It's just such a good service, and if you're spending the $10 a month for it, you might as well get what you're paying for. And these games, like this one with Mutant Year Zero, they're just so worthwhile to pick it up. So like I said, that's kind of all I have. If you do enjoy it, let me know. I always want to hear your feedback, and kind of, I want these games to be something you do enjoy. As I mentioned, this is a difficult one, so if you're not looking for that, you're not going to enjoy the game, because it's a very thought out combat. But yeah, that's all I've got. Let me know what you guys think in the comments, and as always, if you do enjoy the video, leave a like and subscribe. I really do appreciate it, and have an awesome week.